In search of the elusive map, the multidimensional representation of the psyche, of what we're all built of, I'm playing around with different paradigms, in this case fiddling with the height of the tripod, but how to capture a person in a communication. It's a very narrow beam sound. Visual is much bigger. Imaginal is bigger than that. And so we're riffing here in the terrain of psyche. And it's so big on one level that we need focal points. And so the first paradigm we're going to work with is personas. And so I'm going to map out in this whole corner here 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 16-year-old, and 34-year-old. These are the main ages in play at present. And these ages are not just different emotional ages, they're also representations of personas. A persona is a distinct personality within the psyche, within the self, that tends to think, feel, do, and say particular things, and that tends to emerge in particular environments. And so we have persona, a consistency of thinking, saying, doing, and feeling, equals an age, an inner age, equals a context. Now what I mean is that certain types of phenomena in the outer world evoke, very much like the touch tone pad in a phone, very much like the touch tone pad on a phone. If you call 164, you get a completely different response on the other end of the line. It evokes a different persona in a different part of the world answering the phone. If we dial 465, if we dial 654 or 564, it's completely different. And this is worth noting because one of the interesting aspects of inner dialing is that depending on what buttons you press in your partner, in which order, in which context, for which intention, in which energy, at what intensity, opens up an entirely new world. In other words, with these 10 simple digits, sequence, intensity, intention, tone, context, means an entirely different person. meaning who you are, is a direct result of the buttons you press and the buttons other people press and other environments press in a given context, for a given reason, in a given sequence, with a given energy, in a given intensity. And if we understand the holographic nature of reality, so here's another little paradigm, hologram. Now, a hologram is interesting because if this is a hologram, it looks three-dimensional. But what's more interesting with a hologram is that if I break it into a piece, and a piece, and a piece, within the piece, the entire hologram is contained. If you shine your laser beam at a piece of the hologram, the entire image is recreated out of the piece. And this is important in psychic understanding, psychic referring to exploration of the psyche, the focus of our psyche. And just to back up a moment, the psyche is the probability field. The psyche is the probability field of the entire species. The probability field of the entire species, which, when all of the probability fields are combined, from all of the people, in the past, present, and future, equals the possibility field of the psyche. That the psyche is like this other phenomena, the color wheel. Now within the color wheel, you have this color, you have this color. Within the color wheel, you have every color imaginable, and they bleed into each other. The dark green goes into the light green, and the light green moves towards the blue, and blue goes towards the purple. The purple goes to the red. The red goes to the orange. Within the color wheel, you have an infinite continuum, that is digitized by duration. So when you have an infinite color wheel with every color morphing into every other color, the amount of distinctions, see, for example, in the rainbow there's often 7 colors, and so you just say there's blue, there's red, there's yellow, there's green, there's purple. But how do we get 256 million colors, the amount that a computer chip breaks down? And that's by digitizing it in lots of little bits as opposed to a few big segments. It's very much like distance. So this is 0 and this is 10. But that's only because I've broken it up in this number of divisions. There is actually infinite number of divisions between 0 and 10. In other words, if I add another one in between, 10 becomes 20. Now we've got 20, 0 to 20. And if I add another in between, now we've got 40. Then we've got 80. This goes on infinitely. You can have a billion different incremental measurements in a space this big. And it can go on bigger than that if we start dealing with subatomic particles, etc., etc., etc. We can have an infinite amount of divisions of a space, very much like language. We can say, I feel good, I feel bad. Or we can say, my 2-year-old feels good. My 2.5-year-old feels a little bit nervous. My 3-year-old is starting to pout. My 4-year-old is feeling guilty and afraid of being punished because my 3-year-old's pouting. My 5-year-old is impatient and wanting to play. My 6-year-old knows what happens when we do that and so is guarded. My 7-year-old is bored and depressed because all this inner conflict. My 8-year-old wants to commit suicide because it's gotten so bad. My 9-year-old is resigned and bitter. My 10-year-old is starting to find a new interest in hormonal activities. My 10-year-old has figured out, and has this agenda, etc., etc. And we could break it down into every minute of every day, of every hour, or we can break it down into simple, crude things. And what we're really dealing with is the limits of the human brain. We're dealing with processing power, because at an ego level, we have the vast dimensionality of all that is coming into the now, and then being reduced down, 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 down through heuristics into this tiny little orifice of the moment that says, I see this, I feel this, I think this. The I, the little orifice that has to synthesize and represent the totality and the dimensionality of all that is in this micron-like focus that can barely remember 10 digits and cannot say more than one word at a time. Do you know how narrow that is? One word at a time. And the word is not even a complete sentence about a single dimension. And we've got infinite dimensions over infinite amount of time, over infinite amount of space. And we can only process one word at one moment that is not even a complete concept, that represents one tiny bit of the vast totality of the multidimensionality that is, both within us as the human psyche and without us in the totality of our multiverse. And our ego is left processing one little tidbit at a time. One little tidbit at a time. One word of one little tidbit at a time. So this is our limiting point, because we've got to take the vast playpen of the multiverse and we've got to condense it and condense it and condense it, and then use heuristics, these little symbols that mean everything. This is where we get into trouble with love. Let's create a nice little circle called love. Now, once we create love, we then have meaning. We then have questions. And we have heuristics. This is very important, because the meaning of what is love? What is love? And love has a color wheel that breaks down into a variety of a variety of colors, of shades. There's platonic love and sexual love, but this is not black and white. This is as infinite as 0 to infinity. You have sensual, playful love. You have exciting, over this moon orgasm love. You have detached, I'm this and you're that, and this is this and that is that, and I love you because you're doing this and you believe this, and I love this, and so you believe that, therefore I must love you because I love everyone who believes this, and you just said you believe that, so I must love you, which is kind of the Platonic extreme of dissociative, detached, conceptual, abstract love and the left lineal brain. So what's the meaning of love? For who? For you, for your partner. And then what are the questions around love? Do you love me? Am I loved? Does this person love me? Does this person love me more than this person? Do I love you more than I love you, or more than I love you? Or I love you more than them, but I want to spend time with them. How does that work? So there's all these different shades of love. And then there's the heuristics. This is where the map to love becomes really important, because there is the probability field of love, and then there's the heuristic that says this is love, and this isn't love. And because I can't process the whole complexity, here's how I'm going to make. If the man opens the door for me, that means he's polite. That's a heuristic. It could just mean he thinks my type of person would like that and have sex with them, but it's a heuristic. Or if he doesn't open the door, that means he believes in strong women, and he knows women are not weaker than men, and so that's the man that respects me. I want a man who respects me, so therefore I love that man who does that, because that's what love is. Love is respect, and the person who doesn't open the door is telling me that he knows I'm as good as any man, and that's what I want. And so he just did that, so that means I love him. It's a heuristic, it's a symbol, it's a representative. It takes the complexity of the multiverse, the infinite different possible expressions of love and well-being on infinite different dimensions, and it reduces it down. It reduces it down to a tiny symbol that this little I called I can digest, can process at a given moment and say, that's love, that's not love. Now this is, of course, a very useful thing for your lover to understand, because with some people saying you love me because you opened the door, and some people saying you love me because you didn't open the door, and some people saying you love me because you gave me money, and some people saying you insult me because you gave me money, and some people saying you dressed up, that means you care about me and you respect me, and another person saying you dressed up, who you're trying to impress, you're trying to get into my pants. You've got a lot of different heuristics going on. And if you don't coach someone on your heuristics, the odds of them stumbling into the narrow little paradigm of your narrow little brain, or I should say our narrow little brain, it's nothing personal, is very unlikely. But we have this paradigm of love. And within that paradigm, we have choices. We have lots and lots of choices. Because with a multiverse this big, and only one word at a time or on one topic for one reason in one dimension about one possible sentence among billions in one possible language, in one possible culture, in one possible moment of infinite space-time dimensionality. There's a lot of choice out there. And yet, there are probability fields, forces at work that, like gravitational pulls, like the vortice of a whirlpool, tend to draw us down into loops that are almost impossible, like a black hole, to escape, unless a miracle happens. We're going to pause it for there. Okay, let's do a little deeper dive into today. Looking at some of these objects and distinctions. I had one of the most horrific dreams of my entire life 2 days ago. And in that dream, I was caught between image and energy. There was this pinkish energy of the feminine presence and essence that was created, along with this yellow energy. And it was being compelled through evil into hurting itself. And so the first thing that I want to do is talk a little bit about this kind of mechanism within the psyche. And so I'm going to create a little bubble here that's called evil. Let's use a different color. And I want to talk about it in both abstractions and some personal presence and essence. So what is evil? So let's unpack it a little bit. So one thing that evil is live spelled backwards. And that's kind of the direction that I want to explore. So if live or live is the energy moving forward, and evil is the energy moving backwards, this is a clue. So one of the things that I believe is that the synergy of the third energy that is always created in the tension between two distinct energies, two polar forces, often the masculine and feminine. It is a man and a woman that creates and gives birth to a child. And the child is the energy in between. It is the synergy. Now, synergy is when the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And for sure, every child in its potential is greater than the sum of both of the parents combined. And there's a number of reasons for that. And one of them is this piggyback function, where you have two people and they combine to create a third energy, which is, you've probably heard the phrase standing on the shoulders of giants. We are all standing on the shoulders of giants. The existence of this pen, to just jump right into this moment in one little nuanced microsecond of microspace, the existence of this pen for all of about 20 cents on the existence of what's actually quite a big whiteboard, it's about, I don't know, 8 feet long, for all of $90, is an example of standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm talking to an iPad that didn't exist 50 years ago. And that is literally facilitating this conversation, meaning the creation of and mass production. And, if you just look at what's in this pen. First of all, you've got language. Now, language has been developed for more than 10,000 years. English is a language that is evolving. And the English we know today is not the English of 800 years ago. It is not the English of Shakespeare. It is the English of today. Now, how many millions or perhaps billions of people have participated in that evolution? So the language, every single word we speak, is standing on the shoulders of giants. The technology of imprinting color, millions of man-hours. The technology of making plastic, millions of man-hours. The technology of transportation. So within this pen, for this pen to be sold at 20 cents and be used with this iPad on here, we're looking at over 1 billion hours. And we're looking at the participation over hundreds and hundreds of years of millions and millions of people for this moment to be as easy as it is. I bought this ring for $30 from a San Francisco area Buddhist shop who imported it from Nepal. And for $20, I'm wearing a silk shirt bought on Amazon, made somewhere else. I mean, there is so much that we are standing on. And so if we understand that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, there's a reason why the potential of a child is more than the two parents combined. Well, there's a couple of principles in play. Well, first of all, you're fusing 2 into 1. That's a powerful chemistry. 2 into 1. If you've got aluminum and steel to make an alloy, you have chemistry potential that you do not have in either one. When Elon Musk builds a solar company and an electric car company and a space company, you have a synergy that by combining them, developing metal technology for space and then importing it for the car company and then developing solar for the batteries, you've got these synergies. And so a child inherently has, it's not a certainty, because you can abuse, you can traumatize, you can compete with, and a parent can destroy the potential of a child. So it's not a certainty, but it is a probability. All things being equal, the child will go further than either of the parents by fusing the strengths of both, by borrowing the strengths of both. And so we have this natural bias towards life and synergy, with synergy being the essence of life. Two partners coming together to create a third energy that's greater than either. And then the true life is the sacrifice, sacra, to make sacred, making the future sacred. It's no different in investing or investing in money or a child. When you invest a certain amount of your money in the future is more potent, more powerful than the past, than the present, because you potentize it by investing. When you invest in a child, the future is more luminous as a scientific reality. Now, the opposite of that is cannibalism, feeding on the child to protect the present and the old. So the opposite of investing in the future is going into debt to fuel the lethargy of an unsustainable present. So I'm here, and I could be growing like mad and challenging myself to be a better salesman, to develop the value of my product, to get to know my customers better, to provide more service, to provide more value. And I could be generating capital, energy, money, time, etc., for my future self by challenging myself to work and give more. Or I can go into my future and borrow money, take money away from my future self, so that I can sit in front of a TV and do nothing and do more nothing and just sit and bitch and moan. In other words, I can stay small and rob from the future to stay small. And so what we're looking at is that to live is to invest in a beautiful future, to invest in education, to invest energy, to invest effort, to invest skill, to invest presence, so that each day the future is more luminous. When we plant a seed and nurture the seed and care for the seed and grow broccoli and grow carrots and grow cabbage, our future is healthier because we're investing in the present to have a beautiful future. When we borrow money to pay someone else to invest in their future, we weaken our future, and over time it's not sustainable. We cannot keep taking from our future so that we can stay small and let other people, grow and pick up the slack. So to live, to move energy into the future with synergy, evil to pull the future back to support what's here now. In the worst elements of evil, you harness potentially, they're neutral energies, neutral force. You harness the neutral forces that could be good in someone or that are good in someone. For example, Maslow in his hierarchy of needs: security, survival, and belonging. Security and survival, security coming first. In the Nazi concentration camps of the Jews, they first of all harnessed the German need to have a target to shame, a black sheep. Now, this is not necessarily bad, meaning there is a psychological element of projection where we take what is ugly in us that we don't want to deal with or can't deal with, and we make a scapegoat, and then we attack the scapegoat. If you're going to make a scapegoat, it's better to make a scapegoat more powerful than you, so that you have to grow to fight it. It's kind of a cheap shot to take what is ugly within us and project it out on a scapegoat and create that scapegoat into a minority. Jews have, for example, been a minority throughout the world in their minority culture, so they're very easy to pick on. You don't have to grow to pick on a Jew. You don't have to grow to pick on, someone who's transsexual. It's a very small minority. It's very easy in psychology to foment anger, fear, or hostility to anything new and uncertain, anything we don't understand, anything that is not us. It's very easy because there are these energies in the psyche, and the question is, do we own and grow and take responsibility for our shadow, or do we project it out on someone else? Now, if we're going to project it out on someone else, it pays for the evolution of life, the evolution of synergy, to project it on something more powerful than us. For example, for Kuwait to project their shadow out on the United States is healthy, because for Kuwait to take on the United States, Kuwait is going to have to grow their economy. They're going to have to grow their technology. They're going to have to grow their military spending, which means growing the discipline of their people, which means they're going to have to do so much growth to effectively take on as an enemy, a superpower, that it's going to be good for their culture to take on, that we've got to do something about the out-of-hand, shadowy nature of the United States, and it'd be nice if someone did. They're going to have to grow. On the other hand, for the United States to keep picking on other countries, to get to this point where we send drones, we don't even man the aircraft, to bomb weddings that might have some terrorist connection. It's almost cowardice. It's like, where's the growth? If you're going to project your shadow onto an enemy, why not pick an enemy that can do more than threaten a few pilots with box cutters? I mean, that's pretty rudimentary. It's like, the box cutters are going to get us. I mean, we got to bomb those weddings with drones. We've got to, ruin our future with, $8 trillion of new debt to destroy the potential of future generations. For what? It's a bit of a joke. Russia was a good adversary. It's that they were winning in space and all that. So we really had to get our act together. And so having an enemy or a competition, compete, to bring out the strength in another, to compete, from Latin derivation, bring out the strength in another. This is not necessarily bad. We need, in our addictions, in our myopia, and all this kind of stuff, sometimes to have a competition, an enemy, to draw out, something that's within us that we're too lazy or unconscious to draw out in any other way. So in this dream, I saw the military powers, I'm going to assume it was the United States, there were English and all that. I saw the military powers harvesting citizens and compelling them in a very systematic way, much like the Germans compelled Jewish people to sort the jewelry and the teeth of Jews, to sort the clothing, to stock the fires, meaning the concentration camps and the mass extermination of the Jewish people was facilitated by the survival needs of the Jewish people being harnessed to destroy themselves. If every Jew had fought for their life, with their life, fought the cattle cars, fought the rounding up, fought the gas chambers, fought the thing, hurled bricks at the army, the amount of energy it would have taken from the war effort to pursue this scapegoating an old ritual where there's a part in the culture that the culture has a difficult time owning. It's kind of like a long division problem within the culture, where you say 3 divided by 7 equals, see, it doesn't fit in, there's a remainder. So you get 2, but then there's 1 left over. There's this extra piece. And every culture has this remainder. And the crudest cultures have massive remainders. But sophisticated cultures still have this concept of waste, what we don't want. Okay, you're going to fit good in factories, you're going to make good stay-at-home mothers, you're going to make good sports players, you're going to make good this, and then we don't have anything to do with you. So could you just go away? An unsophisticated, undeveloped culture has a remainder where after the psyche is divided by the culture, there is a segment of the psyche that is not wanted, that the culture lacks the imagination to anticipate and utilize with grace. And what a culture does, see, here's again a point of growth or evil. Because what a culture could do is take a stand for zero waste. A culture could say that we have a zero waste policy among things and among people and among the faces of the psyche, among the inner people and the outer people. We are a culture of no waste. Now, what this principle leads to is the culture is going to, particularly a Western culture, is going to come at this mentally. So culture is going to come at it mentally. Okay, we say this, and this is good, which means that what is not that is bad. So this is the line between good and bad. So we just kind of start with that line and say, good and bad. The distinction of good and bad creates a place for the remainder to go. In the prison system, roughly 1 person out of every 100 people in the United States is incarcerated. So not only is it bad, meaning it's broken the law, etc., we're actually spending $100,000. So in a group of 100 people, 99 people are all paying $1,000 to imprison and contain 1 person in the group. That's a lot of money. And it's retarding things, because of course it's not like people transcend, learn about psychology, heal traumatic abuse, become whole new people in prison. That's not what the statistics suggest. The statistics suggest is that new waves of trauma, new crime is learned, new coping strategies that are all trauma-based are learned, and people come out less able to function and be healthy human beings than they went in, which is why the prison population is escalating rather than healing or integrating back into the culture. So in this good-bad thing, the remainder is bad and ends up in prison, and then everyone has to spend money that could be going towards feeding the hungry, that could be going towards educating women, that could be going towards non-profit, that could be going towards planting trees. Any of our healthy investments in the future, you see, a prison investment is not a healthy investment in the future. It is a retarding of the psyche, often of abuse survivors. Now, this is a very important pattern to understand, is this little data point here. So this is a circle of trauma. This is a little boy being born into an environment with unskilled, unattuned, mentally, emotionally diseased parents in a dysfunctional relationship. And so he's getting traumatized. And in the process of him being traumatized, the human parts of his brain are being shut down. And the animal portions of his brain are being elevated. Because long before we were human beings, we were alligators. And alligators don't have the ability to empathize, and neither do people with chronic severe PTSD. An alligator was in fight, flight, freeze mode, as are people with PTSD. An alligator kills or is killed, as are highly traumatized, dissociative people. And so when a child gets regressed into the reptilian parts of their brain without the chance for the more human parts to develop, because the trauma is chronic and unrepaired, the child goes forth into the school environment, and if they are terrified and in trauma, the sociopathic element in the bullying community in school will target the person who has been traumatized the most. So trauma number 10 is going to be the number one target for bullying, which means that the trauma escalates rather than de-escalates at school. Now, as a result of the most traumatized abuse victims and survivors being singled out to be bullied, i.e. traumatized again, there will be a learning disability. In plain English, when you have abusive parents and siblings in an abusive neighborhood, followed by being abused at school, you are completely ringed in with trauma. As someone completely ringed in with trauma, one is severely retarded in one's empathic social development, which leads to isolation, which leads to a lack of repair of the disease of trauma and PTSD. When you are socially isolated, your social skills do not develop. Just common sense. We're a muscle-bound species. Mentally, emotionally, physically, the muscles we flex develop. Now, when you're in fight, flight, freeze mode, you are not learning social skills. You are learning survival skills with the reptilian alligator brain that's 200 million years old. Alligators are not great at courtship. They're not great at mating. If an alligator wants to mate, it's just a dominance game. And so we're facilitating mating that is more like rape than human romance and dance. Now, this is being done to a child. A 6-year-old child has no chance of what is the equivalent of 30-foot tall 2-ton giants to a 6-year-old. They have no chance of going head to head with that energy. And what an abuse survivor who gets traumatized for sticking up for themselves does is they turn their own aggression towards themselves. This is where you get cutting, you get suicide, you get different addictive behaviors, you get bulimia, where the person starts fighting the healthy aggression that's designed to defend themselves, because the scale differential of having, 5 strong, cowardly bullies all picking on emotionally, physically, and mentally who is the least developed in the group, there's no statistical probability saving these mass shootings that some of these people are retaliating with. There's no statistical probability of the healthy aggression saying, fuck off, this is my space, cut it out. Cut the bullying out, you fucking cowards. There's no space for that voice to triumph with the bully dynamic, which is so cowardly that you get the massing of force, usually with people that take the time to develop aggression, targeted on the most vulnerable person in the group. I mean, this is sociopathic behavior, this is reptilian behavior, and it induces and produces reptiles as a thought, feeling, and it is reptiles that can mow down a school system intelligently. Why do I say intelligently? You see, the species cannot evolve when we are systematically targeting minorities and those most vulnerable. The species evolves quite the opposite. Life evolves when the whole and when the group sacrifices itself, and in doing so makes sacred its biological diversity, its social diversity, its ecological diversity, and in doing so develops the robustness and the complexity it develops the robustness through the complexity of the ecology. When we do that, we invest in the future, we create life. When we use the dominance within an unbalanced power structure. Now, keep in mind that this circle on a scientific level is completely equal. Now, what I mean by that is we could draw a huge yin and yang through here. We could draw all kinds of lines. This circle is the entire probability field of the psyche. And we can split it up any way we want. Feminine, masculine, yin, yang, good, bad, cool, uncool, sociopathic, empathic, man, woman, old, young, bitter, sweet, salty, hot, sweet, hot, cold, hot. We can divide this circle of the psyche in literally 1 billion different ways. And none of that will get away from the scientific reality that the circle in its totality is the most elegant shape of forward momentum. That a bicycle, that a car, that a truck, that a train will always be designed as a circle. The wheels, the transportation will always be done as a circle. Helicopter things, we don't jet propellers. They're done as a circle for a very specific scientific reason. The elegance of balance, the efficiency of symmetry. Now, this is science. The efficiency of symmetry is science. The elegance of the circle is science. Now, science is on the ascent up to a point. But one of the ways that we can divide this circle is science in tension with culture, which really means politics. Science is in tension with the culture of politics. Now, the culture of politics is where we come into this moment and deal with the fact that there have been 10,000 estimated human cultures in the last 10,000 years, and that every single culture, from the people that believe that cutting off clitorises with a rusty knife to the people who believe that locking up 1% of their population at 100 grand a year, to the people who believe that scalping, to the people who believe that spending 2 or 3 hours a day processing emotions, to the people who believe that we were created by a turtle. That every single one of these 10,000 cultures has been absolutely clear that they are right. 10,000 completely diverse, pulling us in every way direction in this probability of the field of the psyche, has each known with absolute certainty that the other cultures are just out to lunch. But we, alone in the 10,000 cultures, whichever the culture is, we are right. It's not scientifically possible, but this is politics and this is culture talking. Science is not political. I mean, it is because people are scientists, but the paradigm of science is not political, it is technical. Now, culture, if you're a Nazi German, you take the circle of Germany and you take a whole bit of it and you chop it up and you want to get rid of it. So let's say you succeed. You convince yourself that this whole segment of the wheel is really the problem. And in the cycle of life, you start here and you slowly begin turning around, Then you get to this point here, and now you've got this boom. And it slowly gets around, and the bigger part of yourself that you cut off, the bigger part of each of us as individuals that we cut off, the bigger the part of a country and of a world that we cut off, the biggest part of the brain that we cut off, the more we clunk when we get to it. And here's why. This energy doesn't go away. What has to happen is massive amounts of energy has to be spent suppressing this. I mean, do you know how many Germans and how much money it took to build gas chambers, set aside railroad cars, round people up, convince a whole country that these people were terrible people? Sam Keen has a nice book, Faces of the Enemy, and it talks about the effort you have to do to propagandize a scapegoat. In the ancient times, it wasn't that big of an effort. What they did was essentially they'd bring 2 goats, flip a coin, okay, this goat gets to be the scapegoat. They'd smear it with blood, and then they'd stone it and throw it out into the village. They'd drive it out of the village with stones and rocks, and that's the scapegoat. But it's luck of the draw, and this is, anyone can see that on a scientific basis, it's luck of the draw who's going to be the scapegoat, number one. Number two, most of these people could have used an extra goat. And it's the same principle. We're going to starve the tribe. We're going to hurt ourselves so that we can blame all of our problems on something that, because we've now called it the problem, we've got to get rid of it. We have got to get rid of it. So we've now got to turn energy away from the future, from evolution, from challenging our way of thinking, from challenging our education. We've got to turn our attention away from that to focus on getting rid of whatever it is we've now decided is the scapegoat, is bad. We've got to get rid of this. We're going to attack them here. We're going to, when we decided that there were weapons of mass destruction because Guccifer, a questionable email informant with no credibility, said there might be. Do you know how much money we had to spend to kill 500,000, by our own estimates, innocent Iraqi civilians? Do you know how much potential, brain potential, was lost that could have been allies? Do you think any of those 500,000 people are rooting for the United States? They're dead. How about their family? You think any of the families of the 500,000 innocent older people are all thinking, wow, I just can't wait to thank the United States for coming in and messing our country up? It's like it was so worth losing my sister, so worth losing my 6-year-old little girl for this hypocritical nation. Let's be friends with the Saudis, where this, you think good stuff is happening because of this? No, this is an enormous $1 trillion debt burden on people who have more intelligence 1 and 2 generations ahead. The people who are going to be paying for our stupidity. Because we're not only stupid enough to go to war, we're not intelligent enough to make the money necessary to pay for it. So we're stupid enough to go to war, and we're stupid enough to not have the money to pay for it. So we take the people smarter than us, 1 to 2 generations ahead, with the most potential, and we give them our problem. And then we're too stupid to see that we're stupid, and so we nobilize it and talk about freeing the world of terror. How much terror has been created in the murder of 500,000 Iraqi lives? 1 million units of terror? 1 billion? For how long? How much terror? In how many people? For the 500,000 innocent killed, how many millions were terrified that they would be next? It's quite a way to begin a war on terror, isn't it? By terrifying millions of people and inducing them into trauma, murder, and PTSD. Quite a weapon of mass destruction, isn't it? This is stupidity. So we're dealing with evil. It's not personal. The level of intelligence that can create this is the same level of intelligence at work in families, in parental situations, in schools. You see, the schools produced the leadership paradigms that led to the Iraq War, that led to the Vietnam War. The schools educated the leaders on how to think that way. So everyone else is scot-free, no one else went to those schools? No, it's indicative of the level of evil in the system. And it'd be very interesting to know what would have happened if Hitler hadn't come to power and done this, how that energy would have expressed itself, given how similar we are. We brought Hitler's scientists over to the United States shortly after the nuclear bomb. There's a very interesting energy in the psyche. You look at one of the recent Netflix documentaries, Wormwood, and you look at the dance with evil in human rights, giving scientists LSD, toying with them without their permission, leading in this a number, but in this case one scientist to commit suicide, or be murdered. And then you have the US military investing in keeping a secret of its own dishonor by setting up a man, paying a man in the military to pretend to befriend the widow of the man murdered by the military, and sleeping with her, driving her insane because there's some part of her that knows the truth. But the power structure all around her that her husband served, that believed in her, that's paying the pension, that's holding the honor within the culture, the power structure all around her is leaving its negligence hanging as something wrong with her husband, when her husband may have been the only person with the ethics to say this is wrong. Chemical warfare, mass murder in this way is not in anyone's interest. So that voice needs to be silenced. When the healthiest voice in the immune system must be attacked to protect the power structure, you get evil. You get the devolution rather than the evolution. Had Hitler, as an example, harnessed the Jews and transformed them into one of the most loyal, money-smart people, and demonstrated to the world how well he treated the entire circle. The entire circle. Maybe no one would have fought him. He could have. What would be wrong with Germany governing the world if its protocol for governing was to embrace the biodiversity, the beauty, the uniqueness of every faction of its people and unite that in growth and synergistic evolution. But that, like, who would have thought that if he'd succeeded in uniting and making Germany transcendent and bringing out the best in the world within that country, and then he'd said, who wants to be a part of Germany, and we'll do for you what we've done for us, he wouldn't have needed to fight, and all of that money, all of that energy could have gone into education and expanding a concept of a global species based on best practices, not on top-down authority, because it doesn't need it. If you present a compelling story with evidence within a modern scientific age, there is a built-in bias to be open to it. Success, ultimately, is adopted by everyone, because those who do not adopt the practices that work die. It's that simple. In the competitive aspect of life, that dies. Now, with that as a little bit of a context for evil, in my dream, I saw these military personnel cordoning off and keeping secret a hopeless cycle of abuse, despair, and evil, where innocent people, much like the Jews, were taken into this secret area and were propelled with a variety of a toxic recipe that saw them murdering anyone that would let the secret out and being murdered, and in this way keeping this evil waterfall of energy isolated from the whole. And the amount of hurt, despair, and it could not free itself because of the systematic use of trauma, the systematic use of control, the sociopathic disowning of this part of the psyche and the soul, because you cannot torture and murder, you cannot exterminate a part of something you own in yourself. It has to be something you say has nothing to do with me. But this is always a lie. This is the first time, the first clue that you're dealing with irrationality. Because a scientist that looks at the whole in the probability field will look at things like statistics. For example, I met a Thai woman kite surfing. Now this is pretty damn unusual as a statistic. Now not only was she kite surfing, she was in a pretty dominant masculine energy, which puts her like in 0.1%, or 0.001% of the Thai population. I just don't see Thai women in that attitude. She looked Thai. So I asked her, I said, what's up with this? And it was the most ordinary thing in the world for her, because she'd been raised in Australia. And it has nothing to do with genetics. it's a cultural thing about the role of women and what that would suggest. And for a Thai woman raised in Thailand, the idea of an outdoorsy, masculine, assertive persona that loves sports, that loves competing with men, and loves kite surfing and swimming is just very, very small a statistic. But in Australia, it's very high. And so the fact that her body had been moved to a different culture and raised, grafted onto that culture, it's a completely different personality. Now, this is what science looks like. It says a Jew is just like anyone else, except they were born in this segmented microculture, where if you don't have your hair like this and wear a hat like this, you're nothing. Well, now security, survival, and belonging is being harnessed within a subculture to perpetuate the subculture. And it's very important to understand that cultures have built-in immune systems that are sociopathic, meaning cultures fight to perpetuate the norms of the culture. They do not fight for the well-being, health, and balance of their people. Cultures fight to perpetuate the norm. So you will find a tremendous amount of cooperation within power structures when there is a threat to the norm. Tremendous amount. You'll find people breaking the law with immunity, using violence with immunity, breaking cultural norms to protect norms. It's a very odd phenomena. You look at McCarthyism and the whole treatment of communists. Communists were seen as a threat to the norm, and so un-American practices were used to form the Committee of Un-American Activities to attack people that were different than the norm, that seemed to be a threat. I mean, is it American to burn a country and create CO2? Is it American to burn women and children alive with napalm? Is that American? Or is that fanaticism about anti-communism to protect the norms, the ideas, the dogmas? And it's not like any American benefited. There was not a single American who benefited from burning men and women and children alive. Burning human beings alive. Do you understand the message? The toxicity that this child is growing up in, with the potential to be much stronger than either parent. The toxicity of knowing that his parents sanctioned, with passivity, with silence, or with active participation, sanctioned burning men, women, and children alive, and simultaneously burning the planet. That no amount of Priuses, that no amount of electric cars will take the CO2 out from burning a country, defoliating, violating the feminine, our environment, to such an extent to protect a dogma, not its people. That we killed Americans, that we damaged our reputation, that every single American suffered and suffers to some extent to this day because of the horror of that abuse, because of the evil of using dogma to violate our own human soul and to communicate that the soul does not matter to us as much as our left brain dogma. Because people halfway around the world might want to form a community instead of a capitalist dogmatic culture, a community-based dogmatic culture, rather than the capitalist dogmatic culture. Coming back to the circle, there is not a single scientist, and never will be a single scientist, that will advocate the development of a wheel that looks like this for a bicycle tire. Because knowing that the psyche starts out symmetrical and that we are born whole, and that it's a matter of cutting more and more off of us and saying, oh, that's too rambunctious here, that's too passive here. You're supposed to not laugh so uproariously. You're supposed to pretend that you like that joke because that's the boss. You're supposed to do this. That all of the editing that goes on in a culture and in an individual takes an enormous amount of energy and leaves a lopsided wheel that works great for a little time and then clunk. And the bigger you cut off, like if you cut off this amount, where only about a third of the individual is accepted, you've now got a completely lopsided wheel. So science will not do this, true science, but culture will. Culture is not interested in science except using it to promote its culture, like we're all superior about the science of being educated in this and that and the other. But we don't apply it to the science of, for example, our military policies. There is a science. You can do the math and simply ask the question, how many Americans are better off because this war happened, or this war happened, or this war happened? How many Americans are better off as human beings? How many children are better off? How much is the psyche ascending or descending into its shadow, into its luminosity because of this war? And it does not benefit someone. Now, to be willing to defend something is very important, but the war itself does not benefit. The war in Iraq has not helped the United States. It has hurt numbers of generations while killing 500,000 innocent people. And if we understand that, and that our silence around that is a message to our psyche that violates our human dignity, we can start to see our participation in evil within ourselves, within our community, within our country. And so waking up from this dream and experiencing the visceral sense of how the very most sensitive and vulnerable parts of us are being manipulated into a cycle of evil that is intent on perpetuating the system of evil rather than releasing freedom and bringing healing. There is an intense amount of hatred, an intense amount of destructive energy being induced, created, partnered with, and used to create more of itself because life wants to go forward. If you take a balloon and you push in effort here, you can do that for a year, 100 years, 1,000 years, and as soon as you release the pressure, it goes back to the circle. Because that's what takes the least amount of energy to be symmetrical. So the more we say is evil, bad, and control to suppress, the more we partner in this conflict that we create by the limitations of our own imagination. And so I'm looking at an ego level, waking up in this dream, like, why do I have this dream? What can I do about it? The feelings are so horrific. Where am I a part of this? What can I do? How do I grapple with feelings that are so overwhelming? And I don't know. And so this is one phase of my reality in the last few days. Now this is just mind-numbingly, shell-shockingly big. And one of the things that I'm working with is, when and how to use aggression to create flow rather than participate in this kind of dynamic of evil. When and how to use aggression to create flow. And I'm learning. And so I'll leave it with that. I'm growing, I'm learning, and I'll just add one piece in this kind of numbness, waking up with one of the worst dreams of my entire life and fully understanding the level of absolute evil that exists in pockets of our psyche, in pockets of our population, in pockets of ourselves. Because things are holographic. If it's happening out there, it's happening at some level in here, and vice versa. As I was just lost, overwhelmed, asking for help, to face it, to not be overwhelmed by it, etc. And my motorbike turned around. I was heading one way, trying to mentally develop this, asking for help. I turned around. And I headed off towards a certain beach on the long and scenic road. And 100 feet along on that road, my eye caught the eye of one of the most present and feminine energies I've ever met, sitting at a masseuse table. It was just eye contact. And there was no other engagement. But I circled around immediately and came back to her. And I did a little massage energy test that I do with masseuses to see, can they be present with their own energy on my body? Or are they just going to need me like a machine playing with a piece of dough? Are they going to be present? She was. And just by listening, asking for help, I met one of the most sensual, feminine, delightful, incredible, amazing, ephemeral energies that I've met in my whole life. And she brought life to a dead system, because it's paralyzing. It's paralyzing to be stuck in these overwhelms and tensions, and there needs to be something beautiful, something living, something incredible to surrender to nurture, to love, to be loved by. And I was honored to love and be loved by the life and vitality of this woman, and to have it be a two-way street. I was trying, because she was going a little bit fast and mechanical, and I could feel this is not who she is. And so I sat her down, and I started tracking energy And at every junction, at her breath, she wouldn't breathe to let the energy through. At her elbow, she wouldn't breathe. At her head, she wouldn't let it in. So this always means pain. People block the flow of hurt and pain because when the bicycle wheel of life turns, there's great joy and people love to drive in that terrain. There's great healing, people love to drive in that terrain. There's great excitement, people love to drive in that terrain. There's great abundance. But when you get to the polarity of the hurt and the pain, people contract. They don't want to feel it. They don't know how to digest that hurt, in a loneliness. The loneliness of hurt. And so I took her into her hurt, and she cried. She put her head on my forehead. She let the wheel turn through the hurt. And we came back into the joy of who she was and who she is. And the chance to give that, the chance to love another human being and start the wheel of life again. The chance to see her and have someone touch me with the softness, not only the softness of skin, but the softness of her presence, like someone I've never met in my entire life. Hundreds of masseuses, 70 lovers, never anything like that. Just 10 minutes after asking for help. Now this brought in, a new tension because my partner is an abuse and trauma survivor like myself, which leads to deep insecurities and deep lonelinesses around abandonment and stuff, which leads to the need for healthy boundaries to protect these vulnerable and wounded parts. And so we have very clear agreements about what is and is not okay on a sensual, sexual level. And I'm alone because she needs to be handling some bureaucracy in another city. And the most healing presence I could possibly ask for is totally open and available emotionally and sexually and sensually. And it's incredible and it's mutual. There's a real flow there. And the discipline of keeping those agreements, of not being sexual, but letting our hearts flow. The discipline of that. Navigating the making sense. Like, how does this work and how do all these things come together? Great life was given birth to. And it actually came back into my personal relationship because on a massage level, on a touch level, we're talking 300%, 400% beyond my partner's capacity to be that present, to want to massage, to be that alive. And in my relationship, we don't hide anything. And nor is there anything like, we're going to be together for the rest of our lives. No, we will be with each other as long as we can bring life and healing and growth. And so it was the challenge of bringing this data back into the relationship, not knowing how to do it. Who likes being compared? Who likes having a secret world? None of this. So bringing this out and then having it turn from a hurtful thing to a galvanizing thing to open up our relationship, to be more passionate, to be more dynamic, to lift. I've always believed that a good partnership uses the healthy possibilities on the outside to galvanize new growth on the inside. so that we are not together because we'd much rather be with someone else. We'd be growing more with someone else. We'd be happier with someone else. We'd be having more pleasure with someone else. But we're going to throw all that away because we said we'll be with each other for a lifetime, and that's just the suffering of marriage or something. That's not how I believe. I believe that if two people are actively growing together, that they have a huge leg up over anyone else. So my partner and I have been together for almost 2 years, and we've been spending 3 to 24 hours a day together in quality time, and we've grown thousands of % on all levels. So if someone can come in and compete with that right off the get-go, that's a very rare occurrence, because we've got a lot invested in knowing and respect and all that. So my sense is to welcome these energies in, respect boundaries, but also use them not as threats, but as galvanizing points. So this is another part. So I have these two energies coming within 24 hours, this deep sense of horrific, soul-breaking evil, and the healing, nurturing love of the feminine presence that brings me back to life. And my partner is so feminine as well, and has been responsible for bringing so much of me back to life. And so this is just a little deep dive into today, as I'm continuing to explore this landscape. And that's